So thanks for joining us on a Friday at lunch. I think you'll find it really valuable, and I'll hand over to Guillaume to start.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome here. I hope I look better than I feel. I landed at 10 o'clock this morning from 2 days in New York, and I only just made it back here for time for this meeting. And I just didn't feel like wearing a tie, forgetting that we are videotaping today's session. So, let's talk about the business plan. Most of you that have been with us for a while knows that if you log on to the internet, you'll see the Greek temple. And the Greek temple was developed in 2003, just as I came into my role, and has actually served us quite well for 11 years. The 5 pillars of the Greek temple were the 5 things I stood for when the partners voted me in 2003. However, the world has moved on, and it is our view that the current GPS is replacing the pillars of the Greek temple as a basis of how we see our business and how we look at our business. An important part is the roof of the Greek temple, our aspiration to be number 2 and different. Although it has been with us since 2005, you've got to remember that was set when we were only 55% the size of number 3. At that stage, it was a hugely aspirational goal. We're close to getting there, but as I said at the State of the Nation, it will remain there until 2015 because great organizations achieve what they set out to achieve before they set their new goals. But the pillars of the Greek temple should be vanishing. If you look at our GPS, and we have a very simplified slide on the GPS on the stage or the screen, it's actually a really simple strategy, but it is a very busy slide, and for some reason everybody that reads it seems to read it in a U instead of seeing the very simple approach. And it's an approach that says we really want to not only get to number 2 and different, but we want to change how professional services are experienced. To do that, we do 3 simple things. 1, we run our business extremely well. We do the basic stuff really well. And if you look at how I've put my executive team together, we've got 6 service line leaders that run the profit and loss account, and Keith Skinner and Ian Gerard, and a bit of Pete Forrest this time, really goes to the first box that says great performance. That's where they focus most of their time. The second thing is also common sense. Once you've got an organization that performs greatly, you really have to pick your markets. You've got to pick your clients, you've got to pick where you're going, which industries you're going to go in. And you can't play everywhere, so you've got to be very specific in where you play. If you look again at how the exec team has been set up, that's where John Miko, Jeff Roberts, and Pete Forrester spends most of their time. Managing the client portfolios, looking at the deal review boards, looking at how we go to market, looking at how we win in those markets we picked. And then, the third one, solutions that differentiate. 30% of our fees from different things. That is just the innovation program. It's making sure that we're different. It's the and different part of our vision. And that's where Gerard spends most of his time. So a very simple structure around our executive. And clearly there's overlaps. John Miko does a lot of work there. Some of the other service line leaders play roles there, but that's where Gerard, as the Chief Strategy Officer, focuses all his time. So if those of you that have seen Roger Martin's stuff, there's another way of looking at it. He looks at the cascade of choices and he says, what's our aspiration? And our aspiration is to be number 2 and different. He says, where do you want to play? Where do you want to play is the portfolio momentum. It's the clients that we want here. How are you going to win? It's how we differentiate. What systems do you need to get there? It's greater performance. So the GPS can be packaged into Roger's structure or into the GPS. We prefer the GPS. Because what I like about the GPS is underneath every one of these steps, there's 6 or 7 things that we have said we have to do and that we allocate to people. And twice a year, Gerard and I sit down and we tick through all of these lists and say, are we making progress? And once a year, Gerard reports to the board on the progress that we've made and score us on every one of these boxes. So the intention is that, yes, Gerard and I have oversight of it, and ultimately I'm the custodian of this. But with all these boxes, I can't play in all of them. Nobody can. It's not humanly possible. So the idea is that you pick 1 or 2 of these places where you make a huge contribution. And that's really how simple it is. Understand where they fit in, but pick where you want to play. So that's just my introduction. Before I get into the two boxes, I picked Gerard. Have you got some comments that you want to make at this point?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back just a few steps and talk about the move from the Greek temple to this and the intention behind that. When we had the Greek temple, we were very directive in our approach. And direction worked for us. You know, if you looked at our business plans over the years, it was very specific on that person does that person does that. We established committees and the likes, and that was great in an environment which was sort of predictable. Now, you all know how unpredictable the environment became. And we came up with this concept of SOS, and it's in our business plan at this stage, which is saying we need to sense where slipstreams are happening. We have to be somewhat opportunistic, and then we have to switch. And that requires much more agility. Now, I love the definition that Phil Hardy has put to agility. Agility is all about high-quality decisions made quickly. Not just decisions made quickly, but high-quality decisions made quickly. So, coming back to the GPS, when we thought about how do we put a business plan together for the future, we moved away from the prescriptive, this is what we do and these committees drive things, to much more of an enabling framework, which is saying, how do we create a framework that has a lot of freedom within the framework, but it gives us guidance. And it gives us as leaders guidance, but it gives every partner guidance, and it gives every client director and every manager actually guidance. If you understand this, you can make high quality decisions. You can make high quality decisions that impacts on your domain area better than we can make those decisions on your behalf, or better than a select group of people on their own right can make that. Now that has a consequence. The consequence of creating a strategic framework more than an explicit paint by number strategy is that you rely much more heavily on others to do that. And one of the reasons why we have this session is because if you look at the AS1 survey and the AS1 results, you are the people leaders of this organization, more so than we are. We've always said that people is right at the center of the strategy, but you are the ones that work all the time with the rest of our organization. It also happens to be that this group told us in the survey that you are not necessarily fully aligned or aware of these workshops. And therefore you'll see that the hour that we have will split in two. We're talking about the GPS, but then we want to have a half an hour of debate and dialogue and say, what does it mean for you? What are the issues that worry you? Do you agree with this concept of framework? Is the framework too loose? Do you want it tighter? What do you want? And that's what we want to achieve in this session. So Guillaume made that point on GPS, and that is what it has as its intention. If you see the overall framework, whilst it looks complex, it is actually quite simple. At the top, we have extended the horizon beyond 2050 now to 2020, and we've brought in an aspiration of redefining the way that professional services are experienced. That's the first part of that. At the bottom, we do have the criteria that you measure and want to manage against, and that is at the great performance side, how do clusters perform? At the portfolio momentum, it's growth. Do we grow? And we said at least at twice the rate of what our competitors are growing. And the competitor domain becomes quite complex because you no longer have just the traditional big four, you have all kinds of competitors there. So we want to grow at twice that rate. And then on the solutions that differentiate, it's all about that 30% new or substantially different. And I'm actually, as we speak, I'm going through the process. I'm through half of the service lines now, where I spoke to them about the 30% new and substantially different. And we've never achieved 30%, but we have come close to. At 1 year, we got 27%. We dropped back a little bit. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it needs to be done at the coalface. So that's the measurement. But what is very important in this whole model are the two sides on the right hand. And we haven't spoken about that yet. And that's the capabilities. It is a capability driven. So if you create a framework and you want to set people free to perform, you have to have distinguished, authentic, unique, but applied capabilities. And what we try to recognize on the left, as you can see there, are capabilities we think we fundamentally have. Now, you may argue that some of these things are not as entrenched as it should be, and that's fine. But not only those capabilities will take us to where we want to go, we need new capabilities on the right-hand side. Those capabilities are capabilities that we need to strive for. And by the way, we're actually having a session pretty soon where we are starting to look at the business plan for 2015. It's going to be pretty similar in format, but we are starting to challenge the capabilities. Are there ones that we need to entrench more? Are there ones that we're actually missing? Are there things that we should do more about? So the capability side of this would be the other part of, yes, we want to do stuff under G, under P, and under S. We have capabilities, things that we can trade with, but there are new capabilities that we need to develop, things that we have to create. And if we have that in place, hopefully the framework starts to make more sense. It's no longer paint by numbers, he does that, she does that, we do that. It is, this is a framework that allows every partner, every leader, every account director, and every manager to say, well, this is where I'm predominantly playing, this is where I want to play, this actually excites me, these capabilities I have, these capabilities I know how to access, and these capabilities I'm going to acquire and create. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense on the framework and how we got to the framework of the capabilities on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. Principle, direction that we want to achieve, capabilities we have, capabilities we want to achieve, the 3 GPS elements on how we do that and how we measure it, and that's the framework. That's as simple as it is. Visually, easy once you get to understand it, but you can make it very complex.
John, is there anything you want to add before we go and speak about the 2 boxes that each of us play most in? So, something to help you understand how this works, or where you think we have not done a great job explaining it?
No, I think I just agree with Gerard. I mean, a lot of this is, excuse me, I hope I look better than I sound as well. Yeah, a lot of it is about that development of capability and really thinking about the sort of things that actually can differentiate us and the sort of things that can help us win. So, you know, it is very strongly around every one of us looking at that and saying, you know, what are the capabilities that can help us win in terms of people, but also particularly win in terms of the market and you know, driving a difference. So we'll talk a lot about those capabilities that really can allow us to set us up for success.
So if you go into the detail here now and we look at what we're doing, I have personally taken the top 3 over here: world-class talent, world-class leadership, and inclusion as an attractor. That's where I spend most of my time. Because right from the day that we started, we've always had, under the Greek Temple, the big focus on people. I work closely with Chris Nunza, with Alec Bashinsky, and with all the service line leaders. But as you know, that I involve myself a lot with all the people programs. The world-class leadership is the whole leadership development program, from and different workshops, from D academies to the way we develop young partners, work with the top 70 leaders called the L45. The under 40s group, there's a whole series of forums where we develop leadership skills. My own view is that the competitive advantage we're going to have is the fact that we spend so much time developing our best leaders. Because the world is becoming very unpredictable. In the 2 days I spent in New York, was looking at the Global 2020 strategic plan. And the more you look at that, the more you realize that it is very hard to predict what is going to happen, but the best leaders take their people along on the journey. So that's where I want to spend my time. And the differentiation that John's talking about will never happen if we don't have inclusion. If we don't have a tolerance for people that think differently, forget about the fact that yes, genders do think differently. Yes, people from different cultures think differently. But it's far more important. It's how you facilitate teams, how you facilitate team meetings, how do you facilitate big think tanks, and absolutely make sure that you listen to everybody and get their views. So I have decided that is where I will spend most of my time, but I will make sure that there's people spending time elsewhere. John, do you want to talk about the ones that you picked?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, there's a range of areas, but I think to me the really key things is around that owning the client relationship and really making sure that in terms of everything we do, we own that client relationship. And so that comes from a couple of areas. One, it really making about partners as thought leaders, and so partners becoming real shapers, and not only partners, but right through the firm. So that idea that we can take IP even better than what Building the Lucky Country, which we just had enormous success with, but how do we actually really make sure that we're seen as absolute thought leaders, and that we're actually, in terms of talking about the client's future agenda. Because if we can do that, then we can absolutely own that client relationship and really make sure that we can adapt and be agile in the models that we use. But the fundamental thing is owning that client relationship and the client seeing us as real leaders in terms of thought. I think the other one that I really very strong on is, given the changing nature of professional services, we're seeing that increasing need for alliances. And so that ability for us to bring a whole range of capability to not only from within the firm, but within alliances. And Harad and I spent yesterday, or the day before actually, in Perth with one of those alliances being Worley Parsons. And so the idea of putting a firm like ours that's got 200,000 people around the globe, with all our consulting, financial, audit, tax capability, with an organisation like Worley Parsons that has sort of 46,000 engineers. And so when we actually start to put the capabilities of those two organisations together, it's an incredible power in the market, and it's unbeatable when we actually bring that together. So to me, it's that owning the client relationship, really setting ourselves up to be thought leaders, but then also really making sure that we harness the collective power of more than just Deloitte, but a range of others to really deliver to a client's needs.
And if I then look at the core areas that I spent my time, and obviously it's in the differentiation side. But differentiation is not just a statement of intent. It is actually hard work right now. And that's so important to understand that, because I can easily just start to dream about what it might be and not do anything now. And that's not how we've done it. So if you look at the capabilities that we have here, on the left-hand side, on current capabilities, we have created an interesting footprint on innovation and design. We have something there with data and digital and design that we brought in, and many of you have been through some of those workshops. But how do we make it relevant to our clients? And more importantly, how do we make it relevant to the value that we create? So in that, we had, and over the last year, we spent a lot of time and effort to institutionalize that. And that has led to the appointment of Maureen Thurston and all of the programs that she's running through. And those of you in tax would know that Paul Riley made that commitment that all of tax will go through basic 4D program or 3D program training now. So that has been rolled out, and it is equipping. It's all part of the framework. It's not saying to you, here are the answers. It's just giving you lenses to look at the complex problems that we have to solve to make high quality decisions quickly. The same with digital, where we've appointed Jason Bender. Now, in strategy, you always have this interesting trade-off between what's desirable and what's possible. The what's desirable is we just want to roll everything out all the time, but we had to prioritize. And we prioritize in terms of data visualization, what we've done with our LinkedIn profiles, because we started to see that in the digital world, we may put proposals to clients. The first thing they do is they map those CVs to LinkedIn. And if they see different people, they don't buy us. And we've lost jobs where clients have said, hey, this team that you tell us are so good at that, if I looked at LinkedIn, they're good at totally different things. So those are the things that you just had to create base platforms for, but also a strong focus for those of you in Deloitte Private on Project Hendrix, Deloitte Private Connect. That will change the way that we will service that market. But to do that, we had to create that capability in digital. And then in data, Stu Black has been at it for a long time, but we need to take that whole data program inside and lift it to a whole new level. And that is happening now. There's a footprint already in audit, but we are starting to create capabilities now in audit and in risk services predominantly to have their own data capabilities as well. And this is all about, we are changing the world. We want to differentiate, but we don't want to differentiate in an ad hoc way. We want to differentiate in an institutionalized way, in a codified way, in a way that you can continue to do that. So that is, a lot of the effort has gone into that. We've recently, as we spoke about at the State of the Nation, introduced this notion of Deloitte Access Economics is a privileged asset. We need to get it into everything. We're still figuring out how we're going to do that, but that will be the next year task, is to ensure that the economic side, the insights that we have, gets into it. And if you then jump over to the right-hand side, an IP factory that sets the standard of the future. Building the lucky country, and David is here, he's a core ingredient of that with me and John and Chris Richardson and Meerdad Bagai. that is the type of thing that we should be doing. We want to shape the future. We don't want to just respond to the future. That's the best way of actually having relevance. Now, to do that, we had to put a lot of time and effort into getting this right. And if I look at our Building the Lucky Country Series 1, it was good. Building the Lucky Country Series 2 was great. I think we are now at the almost the awesome level, where we are starting to shape national debate. We're starting to shape a whole new way of thinking in the economy. And the IP Factory is not just taking stuff that we get from abroad and regurgitate it in Australian. That's not it. It is about thinking about the future. But this is the organization that you are part of. The framework creates the ability to be part of that momentum that we want to create. And that's why when we look at the intent, number 2 and different, but you'll see in the current business plan with momentum regained. A reset momentum. And that momentum is at a strategic level as well as an operational level. So, that is where I spend the bulk of my time. There are a lot of other things that we also do. But that, I think, is important to understand how we use this framework to direct the activities on a day-to-day basis for us.
Righto, so from here, questions. If you don't have questions, we'll ask questions. See if you really understand this. But the idea is really just to answer those questions that you have about the firm, where it's going, where it fits into the plan, or elements of the plan that's not that clear.
So on the GPS under additional future capabilities, it talks about world-class talent and world-class leadership. So I'm sure the choice of wording was very deliberate. Can you tell us about what world-class means?
Well, world-class for me means that we have people, well, the easiest place to measure it is to measure our people against what is available in Deloitte globally. There's 200,000 people. I am in enough global forums to see what is happening. I can judge. Gerard goes to a lot of the strategy sessions. John goes to a lot of the client sessions. Our programs gets judged. Our people go to a variety of sessions. Our criteria is a very subjective one. To what extent do our people outperform others? To what extent do our plans that we have become role models for the global firm? And there's a heap of stuff. The stuff that we're doing with Roger Martin that we've been doing for 2 years have now been adopted by the global firm as the format that they want to do their global planning in. So to me, that's where world class comes in. It's a simple thing to say, but at least within Deloitte we have a measurement. And most of the other global leaders will say that our people bat way above their weight. We have a young partner advisory committee. Every year I send one partner on the global committee. Every single year for the last 4 years, our partner was either asked to chair it or was asked to chair the new global partner induction, something like that, where in a very competitive group of 20 people, our partners stood out. That to me is world-class talent.
Can I just add to that? Because world-classness for us is a journey, it's not a destination. And one of the things you'll see inherent in our GPS as well is this continued learning experience. And it's learning our partners and our people to learn from each other and learn together. And that is why every year we try to introduce something new into the organization as well. Because world-classness is not just we've achieved it, it's we need to reinvent ourselves every 3 years at least. So how do we do that as well? So there is a journey element there, it's not just a static element.
I might just add to that. I mean, one of the things we've been looking at the whole reframing of MCBD and what we do from a marketing capability. And I think one of the things we said there is, if you want to be actually successful in marketing, you have to have done some time in Deloitte. So this view that if you want to have a successful marketing career, Deloitte becomes that standard where we may not keep people for all time, but they do a couple of years within Deloitte because it's an absolutely critical component to say, hey, you've been trained at the best, you've worked at the best. So I think that is one of the ways that I always define it, and that should be across all our business.
Ben?
I just want to clarify the transition from our 2015 vision to our 2020 vision. And you mentioned the measures, Guillaume. Have you been measuring our 2015 vision against the Greek temple in the same way that you're going to be measuring the 2020 vision against the GPS?
Ben, not the people that you see here. we've been very specifically or very quiet on the 2020. The board and the partners felt we had to start looking past 2015. The one thing I don't believe in is for an outgoing leadership team to set criteria by which the incoming leadership team should be measured. I think it's an awfully bad system. So we are going to go through this uncomfortable phase where whatever we said for 2020 will most likely vanish by 2015, when the new team looks at it and the new team takes their plan forward. We're just using it as a very directional goal of where we need to go.
And
But,
that is
but
why-
it does make the organisation uncomfortable. Sorry.
No,
Sarah.
but that is why the only thing that we've put up in 2020 is to redefine the way that professional services are experienced. And I think that is wide enough to allow any incoming team to do whatever they want to do, but it's directed enough to say the and different needs to go on steroids. That's what we wanted to do.
It's probably worthwhile just pointing out that when I said the three of us won't be defining it, two of us won't, one hopes to be around here. I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I just said. Yep. Over there.
I'm just wondering if you think there's a way in which we can really harness the capabilities and talents of some of the internal service lines more to help us, I guess, and I guess go out to the market, because we've clearly, a lot of the people in here are in internal service lines. We've got a lot of strong capability. We've got a lot of knowledge. Could that be reused or? Mm-hmm. In some way to help us be different and differentiate ourselves.
I think, John, you've
sure.
had a look at that.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that certainly, if I just talk from MCBD initially, one of the things that we've tried to do is completely redefine everything in terms of what we do, and that's all about aligning to the cascade of choices of the service lines, the programs, and the industries. And so it's saying, look, everything has to be absolutely aligned to that. And so if it's not aligned to the absolute critical choices that a service line or an industry or a program's doing, then why are we doing it? So I think that, to me, is the absolutely fundamental thing that all the internal service lines have to do, is to say, is it absolutely helping the business win in the market? And so that idea of defining value, defining all the activities to absolutely make sure that happens. I think the other thing that we have a right from an internal service line is, it's not our, I think internal service lines don't have the right to tell the business what to do, but the internal service lines certainly have a right to challenge the business to say, is that adding value? Is that the best way of doing this? What is the defined area? So I know from an MCBD point of view, it's always asking about, what is the target market? What value is that trying to create? What are the real objectives of that? So it's like any good advisor, it's really challenging the client. In the end of the day, it is the client's call. So, it is the service lines or the industries or the programs' call as to what they do. But our role is to absolutely make sure that it's done, on a good basis. It's really challenged to say, are we going to maximise the value of that, and are we really going to achieve, in MCBD we talk about it's either reputation, it's reach, or it's revenue. So are we going to maximise reach, reputation or revenue in everything we do?
There's a question here, yeah?
In terms of the collaboration, I was just interested in what initiatives we have to foster collaboration across service lines, if the incentives or reward mechanisms that we have.
Gerard, you go?
Yeah, one of the key initiatives that we have around collaboration across service lines, but market focused, is the hedge program. Now, some of you have seen, some of you are involved in the hedge programs, but we have 3 very active hedges which cuts across service line. These 3 hedges are restructuring and turnaround, led by Martin Strickland. It is the whole major capital projects initiative, led by Michael Rouse, and the finance transformation initiative, led by Donald Graham. Those 3 initiatives actually do have multifunctional, multi-service line leadership teams. They have multi-service line targets, and they are managed in a multi-service line way. Now, these are areas that we've identified where there's market momentum, and we wanted to get our unfair share of that market. But the way we did it was not by creating new clusters or by creating new P&Ls. We deliberately said, what is the key thing in short supply? And we said that's volume. And you'll understand that I'm not just saying sales, it's volume. Volume is driven in our mind by three things. It's by sales, but it's also driven by alliances that we need to have in different ways and potential acquisitions. So if I take the finance transformation hedge as an example, one of the key areas that we had to expand our footprint was in the technology side of finance transformation and the business intelligence side. So two of the non-organic growth initiatives we had, NXG, as well as what was Link's business that I forgot the name of it. We acquired two businesses.
Quadro.
Yeah, Quadro. We've acquired two businesses in that space that allows us to expand the footprint now. The revenue falls in the service lines. The revenue falls where it's managed by service line leaders, and that's great. But that's how the matrix is starting to work. So that is a core ingredient on collaboration, but collaboration in an institutionalized way. Just to finish that answer, when we started our planning for 2015, we went, as we always do, to the industry leaders. And they came up with their strategic radars. And out of those strategic radars, we got all of the industry leaders to identify the 5 highest growth priorities. We then, as an executive, sat down and we came up initially with the top 25 growth areas. But we had a huge whiteboard with all of these things up there. And we went through a prioritization exercise. Now, here's the beauty of leadership. You never have all the data. So you have to make judgment calls. And we went through that, and we landed on 16 things, which collectively adds up currently already to about $300 million, that we think will drive a big chunk of the growth going forward. Those 16 things were the things that we took into our market dimension day now. And of those, about half of them will go into the hedge program, but all of them will have the hedge discipline. So, a long answer, but we take that collaboration in the marketplace, very, very important. We have moved way beyond. Collaboration is if an auditor and a tax guy actually have a drink together. That is not useful. It's helpful, but it's not useful.
And we have the ultimate reward system. Those that do it well get to keep their jobs. And but in a more serious note, if you look at the partners that have exited us or been asked to leave, a large number of them failed because they decided to go alone, and it is just too hard. If you look at when we decide on partner admissions, and it gets close, and we have limited numbers, we always favour people that have demonstrated they can collaborate. If you look at equity partners promotions, even more importantly. And then any leadership role, I will just not promote anybody that has not demonstrated that they can do it, because the last thing I want to do is have a non-collaborator with power. So your whole career gets shaped by the ability that you have to collaborate. As a matter of interest, I personally believe I would never have landed where I am if it wasn't that when Gerard and I were young partners, auditor and consultant, same office, we worked very closely together, and both our careers took off because we were jet fuel for each other. We couldn't have been further removed in our professional skills, but we knew that collaboration was the answer. There was a question
Jim,
here.
sorry, can I just touch? I mean, to me, the ultimate place of collaboration is client. And so hence one of the things we drive so strongly around strategic account program, and we're now rolling out the LIC, which is the next locally important client, which is the next basis, next group of clients, is around cross-service line, multi-function teams working together on those. Because I always use it. It's a bad phrase. I've got to get a better phrase. But collaboration for a cause rather than for cake. Because as I said, if you go down to have a coffee together or a beer together, that doesn't last. Whereas actually you're working around a client that's about and we only win at clients, particularly those big ones, when it's actually multi-function, multi-service line working together. Then that's when we absolutely win. So to me, that's the absolute basis of collaboration, and where we just got to keep driving those cross-service line teams to win.
And I know you want to ask a question, but there's one important thing that I have to say on collaboration as well, and that is that collaboration is internally, but it's also across the boundaries of our organization, because we need to bring the best into the organization, and we need to take the best into the market. We are finalizing the first draft of our Asia Pacific strategy for Deloitte Australia. If you read the Building the Lucky Country 3, you will realize how dependent we are for growth as a country on what is happening in Asia. So we have to have specific steps, institutionalized steps there. And that is, I see Sungwoo here who's leading our Korean client service desk. Those desks are becoming much more important, and we have to have a culture of wanting to collaborate versus just protecting my own bottom line to be successful in the future. So, yes, we are doing stuff, but the importance of that is incredibly high going forward as well. Sorry.
Thank you. Well, you've nearly answered my question because it's based on the collaboration. It's in relation to the acquisitions. We've had a lot over different service lines over the past number of years, but how are we truly optimizing those acquisitions to make sure they're not just service lines, but across the firm?
A lot of it depends on the reason for the acquisition. So in specific instances, the acquisitions were very narrowly focused. In others, like the Brief Group that brought OH&S in, we knew that OH&S would be a much broader skill set. Bringing in Moore Stephens in Parramatta has got all what we needed is we need a bigger face so that we have the other skills behind it. So for every one of those acquisitions, we understand very clearly to what extent they are there to bring a deep skill into a very specific area, or where they have to bring a broad skill to help us change what we have to do. We are very detailed in our thinking before we embark at these acquisitions.
Well, then I suppose how can we, as a manager and director group, truly to go back to that capabilities, how can we help to optimize those integrations?
I think it's similar to the way that we spoke about. We picked a few boxes. I think you can spread yourself so thin that you have no impact by trying to touch a few things. The key is to understand what is happening here and pick a few, have an impact on them, or let them have an impact on your service, and then add more and add more. That's to me, that's the only way to do it. But to constantly measure yourself and ask, have I been expanding my footprint, my shadow, whatever you want to call it, or have I just been so busy that I haven't done anything to develop myself?
Can I just add one thing? I think the simple thing, and we see it a lot through things like Deal Review Board, I'd just ask on every client, every situation, is there someone else in the firm that could add some value to this? By bringing in another service line, it might be Deloitte Access Economics, it might be tax, it might be audit. What is it that if I bring someone who's got a slightly different lens, can they do something that actually can enhance the value to clients? And I think, it's one of the things that we have to do more and more of, because when we do that, there's no question we add something different and we increase our value. So I just ask that really simple question. I may be locked in this service line, I'm delivering a service, but is there someone else that I can just talk to that might bring a different lens that actually will really shift the value that's created?
I just wanted to ask a question around your comment of tolerance for people who think differently.
Yeah.
And obviously, managers and directors in this room, we on a daily basis are leading teams and managing teams. And I was just really interested to know from the three of you, both from a client perspective, but also from a people perspective, what tips you might have or guidance you might have on how we can really encourage and enable, different views, different ideas, and not get into a groupthink scenario.
I think we'll all three have very different approaches. My view would be, firstly, look at the people around you and ask yourself the question, have I somehow surrounded myself with people that think just like me? Secondly, I think it's very important to explain to people what it is that you want to do or why you want to do it, but not the how. And then really encourage people to contribute to the how. At times you have to lead. The world is not all about democracy and everybody doing it. Leaders have got a role to at times take the decisions. But to get the best out of people and to create an environment where people aren't too scared to say, you know what, I absolutely disagree with that. And our exec team is like that. Some of the debates that we have there are very robust. A lot of my ideas, and I'm pretty wedded to my ideas, have not ever seen life or saw life in a very different format, because the team, as much as I hated it, challenged and changed it, and it became a much better idea. And I think it is just something you've got to work on and work on and work on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's always that challenge. But I'm a great believer in challenging. I think it's one of the things that I'm very strong around, the fact that that's what clients are looking for. They're looking for us to push their thinking and to change their thinking. They're not just looking for us to say, deliver on what they ask for. It's how do we shape and change their thinking, and I think that's the same internally. As Guillaume said, no one's got a mortgage on all the great ideas. So I think we always see the best successes when someone comes up with an idea and people build on it and shape it and change it. So I think it's always trying to bring that mentality into any discussion that we have.
And I agree 100% with what they say. You know, I can't be different. But I will. There are two things. There are two things that I just as tools of the trade. I think helps you to do that because it's not easy. It's not many of us that just think about things and then are very open to have it challenged. And the one is a lesson that I've learned when I operated in Singapore, in East Asia, Southeast Asia at the time. And I capture it in the phrase of, and those that work with me have heard me saying this many times, but self-righteousness is not a virtue. What I think, as well considered as it may be, may not be right. And circumstances are different. Clients are different. How they think about things are different. Priorities are different. So my self-righteousness is not a virtue. I have to be open to that, as difficult as it is. But the second thing, the counterbalance to that for me, is that when we have discussions on issues and people want to differ, I want them to have considered differences. It's not a difference for the sake of difference. Personally, I actually hate the devil's advocate approach. So I want them to be above the line. I want them to act above the line. And the two phrases that I hate in conversations, if we are trying to come up with novel ideas, are the phrases of the notion of they should. You know, it's not they should. It's I think this is what it is. You're entitled to your discussion, a point of view, but you know, be convinced that it's not they should. Or my all-time favorite is if we are serious. Now, decide whether you're serious or not. Don't say, if we are serious, some nebulous force will help us to do these things. If you are serious, no, I think, yes. And that helps. So, but that's a style issue as well. That works for me. I want people to be upfront with those things.
Right there.
I've been working heavily in the turnaround and restructuring hedge over the last few years, and one of the things that I've really seen is connecting the different capabilities and functions that we have across Deloitte is not the full battle. It's also the assets that we have, whether it's data design, digital, access economics, EDC, or the new technology rooms. I think one of the biggest challenges we're facing across a firm is taking what we already have as assets and actually doing something different with that, taking these sort of golden puzzle pieces and putting it together to form something totally new. One thing we try to do at the beginning of every client is figure out how we're going to make this a different experience for them by taking all these different assets. So I'm just trying to think of that in terms of the GPS there. It's not necessarily new acquisitions or new capabilities within Deloitte, but all the ones, there's a lot of rapid acquisitions and newfound technologies and things like that. Where do you see that fitting within the GPS and how we actually connect those dots?
And this is at the heart of the S. And if you read this, 30% new or substantially different. We recognize that just new thoughts are not going to generate all of the stuff that we want. We absolutely encourage the substantially different, but we go beyond encourage. That's why we've introduced the 4D program, is to say, and there are tools. Now I go back to the framework and the actions within that framework. What you say makes me feel proud, because that is what we want. We want every manager, every director, every consultant for that matter, or analyst, to say, hey, no, you know, we actually can do this different. We care about the experience. We want to work towards a place where we have to redefine the way that professional services are experienced. So you are doing exactly the right thing. What we are saying is it fits into that. However, if you look at the detail map, it is not just in the solutions that differentiate in the future, it's very much in the great performance as well. It's right slab bang in there as well.
Can I just do a little add? Because to unrealised assets or massive asset that we've got that we never use, and it's been a frustration of mine, but you'll see in the next couple of weeks, it was a great idea by Dennis Kralis, who's the Clients and Markets Leader for Risk, and it's been brilliantly built by Mo and some of the team out of MCBD. You'll see a sensing tool that we're rolling out. And what we're asking everyone is to just a one-liner. When you actually see a client, then just put in there a one-liner. You know, saw the CFO of X and was interested in, you know, finance transformation and cost reduction. And so this simple tool, you can actually have it on your mobile, also on desktop, one-liner, because you actually think about it, we must do, and I keep saying 1,000, but it's probably more than that, we must do at least 1,000 client visits a day. And yet we've got this unbelievable source of insights and data that we don't tap. So this thing, we're just trialling it with a small team at the moment. It looks fantastic. The ability to then just say, if we can get everyone in the firm, every time you see a client, and you may not want to actually name the client, it can be done on a confidential, but just put a one-liner, and then we start to, and we've got all the analytics behind it. We just start to see this enormous trend of insights and activity that's happening across all the client world. That in its own, if we actually do that and get the culture right to do that, the shift in opportunity, the shift in ability to get ahead of the clients, ahead of the competitors is massive. So that's just one of those of saying, this is an extraordinary asset that we've never really harnessed, that, we the next couple of weeks you'll see that come out. I think it's just an amazing opportunity.
Hi. In the Future Now article, there was a little piece on winning the war of talent, and I was just wondering, from your perspective, how we're going on that, and how much of that relates to retention versus bringing people in, and then sort of kind of how these kind of things fit into, I guess, whether it's a retention sort of strategy or whether it's an acquisition side of things.
I reckon it's both and. It's a retention strategy, it's how you attract the talent, but it's also a development strategy. It is very possible that you can work with great talent and do nothing with it and get that great talent to repeat the experiences the whole time. My frustration is that as a firm, at times we do very well. Our surveys show that at times we get the best out of universities. But it ebbs and flows. We're really struggling to be consistent. More importantly, if you take all over our clusters, we have clusters that without doubt attract the best. And we have clusters that scrape the barrel, because all you need is for a group of partners to go off the boil, for people to leave, they spread the news, and that team will take years and years and years to recover. So if there's one thing that has frustrated me, is that we haven't been able to harness this obsession with getting the best. Because once you have the best, the teams fly. And then you attract the best, and it becomes a self-perpetuating machine. But it happens, it's like sports sides. When they go off the boil, they go off the boil, and it's very hard to get people to follow it again. At times we can be quite forgiving on leaders. The one thing that we're totally unforgivable on is once we believe a leader of a cluster or a partner has lost followership. Once you've lost followership, game over. It's best that you go elsewhere, because we just don't see you getting it back. And we preach that the whole time, even at our exec level. I would say that every second month we talk about the importance of making sure our whole executive has got the followership of the partnership team.
If I may add just one additional element to the attraction, retention and development side, is I think there's also an extension side. And that is, we know that we're in a profession where there's a churn of people. If we give our people a great experience whilst they're here, they are part of that redeveloped or redefining the way that professional services are experienced internally as well. You create one of the biggest assets that you can, which is that alumni network out there. And that sense of affinity is incredibly important. So, what we need to think about is what we have, but also what we let go and let them go in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Sorry, yep, you go first, and then, Vesa, yeah.
I was interested in the external connectivity as part of the future capability and how we can better turbocharge that. And I notice it isn't under the current, so it's future. And I know you've done a lot of work with the labs to develop external relationships with the iconic thought leadership has helped us drive it with associations. Going forward, how can we turbocharge that more? Because we're starting, but what about alumni, for example? We don't do anything. There are a number of other categories where we haven't really built that, and I wondered if that's on who's driving that.
Yeah, so look, I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that we're rolling out at the moment to partners, but we want to roll out across the firm, is things like relationship mastery. So I think it does come down to a number of activities. The first and foremost is about that, how do you build great relationships, which is about having, how do you have great conversations with clients that are based on IP, based on challenging them, that allows you to build great relationships. But then it does also go to a lot of the areas like social media and the way that we use comms, and clearly the social media committee and the social media strategy, I think, is just becoming increasingly important because we know that's the way that people connect. So to me, there's no one single bullet, but it's absolutely building the skills of our people to build those relationships. It's actually creating the collaboration platforms, on a one-to-one, on a client-to-client, but also broadly across social media, to actually drive this greater connectivity. But it's also creating the pull by doing things like, the iconic thought leadership, building people as shapers. So lots of activity happening. Clearly there's a long way to go, but I think fundamentally it's around teaching some of those skills around building those great client relationships that allow us to make sure that we do connect.
There's a question back there.
Yeah. So I think the notion of collaboration has come up quite a bit in the conversation today. One thing that's really interesting for me is that I've seen a lot of instances where we'd miss out on pieces of work because we'd have our competitors potentially fly out, global representation, bring them over to client meetings, get them stuck into the conversations there and really justify their global presence. I think we've probably got as much of a global presence, if not stronger, than our competitors. I'm just questioning how much of that whole notion of global collaboration, bringing in resources that are absolutely, market leaders and market subject matter experts in a particular area. How much of that are we considering in this business plan in order to not lose as much work as we have in the past to our competition?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, on all the big things, there's no question we don't get there unless we bring global capability, and clients are looking for the best of global capability. I mean, we do it a lot, and I think there's lots of examples we do. It frustrates me a bit when people say, well, we won't do it, because I think we will. Just often I'm just not sure whether we actually ask the question, and it's certainly one of the things from a deal review board where we look at all this, it's one of the first questions that we ask around, have we connected with global, have we looked at bringing the best of global expertise? So I think generally, I mean this is a generalisation, but it's because a partner or a team just does a very myopic local thinking rather than reaching out, because clearly we absolutely believe in it. It's critical. We can go through so many of our major wins, and unless we brought that global capability in, we weren't going to win. So I think it's something that we absolutely do. We have to do more of, and certainly from our position, we just see it as a critical component.
So I see Becca showing me the time's up. So last question.
Last question, and it's in the vein of open and frank debate. I'm going to ask a question about the only box on there that we haven't talked about, which is the underpinning of signals and making moments matter. I think we're potentially creating a bit of a conflict and duplication between what signals is saying and what we're trying to do with making moments matter. Is it time to actually review signals and potentially adopt the Making Moments Matter framework as our internal and external behavioural framework?
I think there's been a lot of discussion. In the next 15 months, that's not going to happen. I think signals is about how we behave internally and how we develop ourselves. To me, signals is I think it's a guidepost that you could take with yourself wherever you go in life. Making moments matter, to me, is about how we serve clients. And I think it is one of the greatest gifts we've been given. It has changed behavior. It has given us a language on how to handle stuff. But I think to think that making moments matter is the only value system that you should have. That's not those are activities that you should undertake when you're serving somebody. But aiming to be famous, having fun and celebrate, that's a very different set of behaviors, which I honestly believe the day I leave Deloitte here, those things will guide me as much in my next career as it guided me in my career over here. Okay, well, guys, thank you very much for taking up an hour. I hope this was half useful. It's always, I think, the highlight for me is to listen to the questions and to know what you guys are thinking about. So thanks for being so active with that. Have a good day. Thank you.